Still not a record, but it was up there.
Let's back in the swing of things.
All right, good morning, everyone. We have a full agenda today, so I'd like to get us started on time. So I'm Angie Center, APAC Chair, and I have some exciting new introductions. This morning, we do have 3 new council members, so thank you to new council members who have donated your time to the cause. They are Andrea Dodge. She's the administrative manager from the Department of Physics and Astronomy. So it sounds like an amazing department to work for. Justin Peterson, he's a quality assurance and compliance coordinator from Cougar Health Services Student Affairs. So thank you, Justin. And Mark Gonzalez, he's a technical coordinator from Connors. So thank you to Mark as well. We do also have an alternate that was elected as well, and that's Gordon Henderstrom, also from Cougar Health Services, right? Yes. Look at me, so good to remember. So thank you to our new council members. Very excited to have you on board, and again, thank you for the investment of your time into APAC. The next would be APAC Chair's report. I don't really have anything that I haven't already talked to you about. Sat in on the Board of Regents meeting. There was kind of no new news in the world there. In my chair's letter in the newsletter this year, I gave a brief update on where we're at on the progress towards our strategic plan. So those of you that don't know, we did a very comprehensive strategic plan about 1.5 years ago based off of a survey that we sent to all APs. So we did a pretty robust needs assessment and created a strategic plan that we feel is very viable, and it has a lifespan of 2025. So I just wanted to give you an update on where we're at on that. So if you read through that, it will give you kind of a 10,000-foot view on our progress, on where we've made some good progress and where we still need to work. So after you review that, if you have any questions, please reach out via email at apac.wsu.edu. I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So I think transparency is really good when we're talking about strategic plans. And if you're relatively new and haven't seen that, it is linked to our website as well. So go ahead and view that. All right, we'll do our committee updates, constituency concerns, and then I'm really excited to have some members of HRS here with us today to answer all of our questions on what the heck is happening in the land of HR. So some of it will be very good news for some of you, and some of you will be good news once you have your concerns nullified, hopefully. So committee reports, do we have a budget report, Carla?
I do. Good morning. This is Carla Ely Marroquin here at WSU Spokane. And if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen. So here I have the budget here. Everything's been reconciled so far through November. And so I don't have the numbers subtracted from the general budget, but just so you know what the numbers are and what they look like, I've redone the professional development and events budget to update it to 5,000 so that it's ready for the APAC Appreciation Week. Operations budget, I've adjusted a bit to add the carry forward and subtract a little bit from that to professional developments. Travel retreat still the same. And over here, I have all the information from the APAC retreat. Let me minimize this real quick. So scroll down. So far this year for travel and the retreat, we've only spent $902.76 through November. If there's more travel after that, I will update that at the next meeting. And then for tech fees, goods and services so far, only $584.10. And sorry, I'm going so fast through this. But then we just have our administrative fees. Thanks for Workday so far, which is $115.72. So we are doing very well with our budget. I will go through December and January and have an update at the March meeting.
Great, thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
I'm so used to working in a hybrid space. I did not welcome the Zoom sphere there. So welcome, Zoom. Very glad that you're here. I just think of us all in one pot, so I didn't think about that. And for those of you on non-Pullman locations, we do have budget funds to support you. So if you're in a non-Pullman location and you would like one of us to come to some staff thing that you have going on as a meet and greet, we do have some travel funds available for that. If you want to increase membership in your location and you want money for coffees and donuts or something like that as a new member drive, please reach out to us and we will review those and see if we can get you those necessary funds. That pot of funds is for all AP and APAC members, not just Pullman specific. So please reach out. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. They've got some great stuff happening. Is anybody from their committee online?
This is Jenny from Puyallup. I am on the committee, but I missed the last meeting, so I'm not going to be very helpful today. Sorry. Oh, but I did put a tidbit together about Black History Month from a perspective of, get curious. I just would like to encourage everybody to use this special time to learn something new, to challenge some of our, thoughts that might be lurking among us where we don't notice, whether that's in ourselves or in other people, and do your best to come out of Black History Month a little more educated. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. And those of you that have the digital version of the agenda, that her statement is linked to the agenda there. And fully support anybody that wants to participate in any of the Black History Month events. They're actually really fun. You will learn a lot, but there's just a lot of fun community building stuff going on in the month of February. So I highly recommend that. Election and bylaw report.
Yep, I'm online, Angie.
Okay. I know, I was looking around the table.
So currently we have our regular elections taking place as far as the application and nomination. So particularly for folks that are in non-Pullman locations, if you are interested, I would strongly encourage you to apply or nominate some of your peers that you feel would be good additions to the team. That closes at the end of the month. So please, again, consider throwing your hat in for that.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Professional development, Spencer?
Yeah, we met 2 weeks ago. We meet again today. We have timeline finalized for the APAC contribution awards. Those applications will open up on March 1st, and be open for the month. So we're looking forward to promoting that. And then we meet this afternoon, like I said, to hopefully narrow down options for a professional development speaker for APAC Appreciation Week, as well as hopefully narrow down how we can engage extension and other campuses in APAC Appreciation Week in a more meaningful way.
Great. Appreciate your work on that. So when you guys see the information coming around about nominating for the AP awards, please share it amongst other APs. And don't be shy to ask your supervisor to nominate you. I mean, they're busy, and it's okay to bring them the email and say, hey, this is going on and I do XYZ. I think I qualify for this. Would you consider nominating me? Because it's really important that you get the credit that you deserve. There is a monetary award for it, which is really important too, because we can't give, bonuses in the way that WSU is structured. So this is a great way to get some funds to some staff that really deserve it. You can nominate your fellow colleagues, you can nominate supervisors above you, subordinates below you. There's anything and everything. And it is also open to all locations. In fact, we have it kind of truncated out so that we are being very equitable with those awards to those other locations. So make sure you get that award, that news out. It's really, really important. And it's a really fun event. We will stream it. So all locations can be there, but we will do a party here in Pullman as well. Marketing and communications.
Hey, good morning. We had to skip a meeting last week, but we are working with the event committee and elections committee to get the word out about the elections and any events that are coming up. I just written down that April AP Appreciation Week in April, we're gonna pretty heavily market that. And thank you, Angie, for bringing up the funds for money for like coffee and donuts or whatever at non-Pullman locations. I didn't realize that was something that we could do. Marketing committee can help with any APs that want to maybe have a get together at their location and recruit. That's a good idea. But other than that, don't have a whole lot to report. We're just working with events and elections about getting the word out for the upcoming projects and events.
Thank you, Brady. I appreciate your work on that committee. All right, that concludes our committee reports. We have received several constituent concerns, but they were all in relation to the changes that are going on in HRS, and we did send those off. So we'll be discussing those during the HRS presentation. But is there any other constituent concerns that anyone wants to bring up right now? I'll pause for an uncomfortable amount of time so people on Zoom can find their unmute button. We're all just trying to survive the workday. Okay, so if anything comes up or you hear something at the water cooler, anything, please send it to apac@wsu.edu. Anna does read them all, and she gets them to the appropriate person. So we really do take that seriously. Again, we can't be the voice of APs if we don't use it. We need to know what's going on. Even if it's a brag report, you know, something great happened, you know, we'll share that as well. You know, those are things that we can circulate. And like with that, the nominations, we nominate somebody for the AP award, we send them their nomination letter. So even the people that don't win are going to get all the kudos and love that you send down the pipeline. So we think that's really important too. So, okay, think of something later. Something ticks you off later in the day. Please let Anna know. She will take care of it.
Well, Angie, I do have some good news in Spokane.
Oh, I love good news. Go for it.
Yeah, the Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, Dr. Nagata, starts Monday. So, yeah. So I'm excited.
I'll tell him we welcome him on APAC's behalf. I love that.
Thank you.
Hiring is better, by the way, just numerically. So I'm hoping some of you guys are feeling that lift off of your shoulders as we hire. And speaking of hiring and everything that's going on in the HR space, so we want to give a hearty welcome to some of our HR folks that are going to come and talk to us about some of the new policy updates that are coming down. We have a couple online, and we have one brave soul live in the room with us as well. So we have Melissa Donato, and she's the compensation manager. We also have Teddy Fairs, and he's an HR consultant. And then in the room live with us, we have Heather Burchell, and she is also an HR consultant. So I'm going to turn it over to them and their presentation, and we will all learn about the updates together.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I am Teddy Ferris. Melissa is going to be monitoring the chat. So if you do have questions, we'll have a little bit of time between topics, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat. So this morning, we are going to be going over a few of the recent changes that have been going on in the HR realm, Fair Labor Standards Act updates, Equal Pay and Opportunities Act updates, and then temporary hourly employee rule changes overview. So we'll go ahead and start with the Fair Labor Standards Act updates and reminders. Before I dive into some of the updates, I did just want to give a brief overview of what the FLSA covers. So it sets and regulates compensation, minimum wage, overtime pay, compensable time. It also covers the Equal Pay Act of 1963, child labor standards, and then record keeping. So individuals who are, when we're looking at overtime eligibility, there are 3 different tests and different exemptions to be ineligible for overtime. So they must be an executive, administrative professional, or higher level computer specialist based on position responsibilities. So the administrative is significant independence and a lot of decision-making and some authority with that decision-making. Within the professional level, there's a creative professional, and like I mentioned, the computer specialist as well. There are 3 tests that have to be met for a position to be considered ineligible for overtime. There's a salary basis test, the actual salary test, and the duties test. Our office and HR is responsible for determining if a position meets those 3 different tests. So the salary basis test ensures the employee's position is paid as a salary, so it's not changing with the number of hours worked. The salary test ensures the employee is paid at the set minimum salary per the law. Washington State has a slightly different salary basis test, which has recently changed in January of 2023. So the new monthly minimum salary to be exempt from overtime is $5,456.55 a month, or $65,478.40 a month. So that must be satisfied for an employee to be considered ineligible for overtime, as well as meet the duties test as well. There are some nuances when it comes to teachers and those types of positions, but for purposes of today, we'll focus on the executive, administrative, professional, and computer. So in terms of, again, a couple of key concepts to be aware of when it comes to overtime eligibility is individuals who are eligible for overtime all time from the start of their first principal activity, which is activities an employee is employed to perform, until the end of the last principal activity of the day is compensable. So this would mean if you're working at home, if you're working on checking or responding to emails, administrative paperwork, that's all generally considered time worked. Hours worked over 40 in a work week. And just a reminder, WSU is 12:01 a.m. Sunday to midnight Saturday, must be compensated at one half the regular rate of pay. There is an option. I know there was a question regarding compensatory time, which is essentially kind of a bank that is at time and a half. That is an option for employees, but it's not a requirement for them to do. And if they are going to be agreeing to having a compensable time, they need to make sure that they're working through their manager and ensuring that that's approved at that level. WSU cannot require an employee use compensatory time instead of being paid for the overtime. Another concept as well for those transitioning or who have transitioned recently to overtime eligible are meal and rest breaks. So they must receive a minimum of a 30-minute unpaid meal break toward the middle of each work shift, no more than 5 hours after beginning of their shift. As noted on this slide, there can be written agreements if an employee wants to waive the meal period and work what's called a straight shift. But that is the main requirement, is a 30-minute unpaid meal break unless there is another agreement in place. Overtime eligible employees also must receive a 15-minute paid rest period for every 4 hours worked. This can also be intermittent, but it cannot be combined at the end or the beginning of the shift or combined together. Those need to be within those different hour periods and be taken throughout those 4-hour periods. Also, travel time. I know there were a couple of questions related to that, and travel time is one of the most complex areas of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and Washington State is a little bit more favorable when it comes to what is compensable with travel time. So in general, travel from an employee's home to the office is just considered a normal commute time and it's not compensable. But if we have an employee that comes into the office, travels to different work sites throughout the day, that type of travel is generally considered time worked. If you are traveling and if you are driving or a passenger out of town for a special assignment, and the travel all occurs in the same day, all of the driving time, with the exception of normal home to work travel, would be compensated. In terms of overnight travel in Washington, like I mentioned, all travel time related to work is compensable regardless of the number of hours or when the travel takes place. It includes any time necessary to get to an airport, train station, or other transit center necessary to complete that out-of-town travel. Compensable out-of-town travel would take place for the employer's benefit and is requested to meet the needs of a particular assignment. And it would be an integral part of the principal activity of the work, which I know we spoke about a little bit earlier. This is true regardless of whether the employee engages in additional work during that travel time, or if, again, they're a passenger on that journey. I want to make sure that I've hit all of the topics that we were meant. One reminder too, once an employee arrives at the employee's lodging, the employee is generally no longer on duty, and that time is not compensable as hours worked if the worker is free to engage in personal activities. As I mentioned, given the complexities of travel time under the FLSA, we do strongly recommend that managers and employees, if they have questions prior to traveling or what would be compensable or not, we do encourage that you reach out to your HRS service team. Some resources for information regarding Fair Labor Standards Act, the U.S. Department of Labor, Washington State Department of Labor and Industries, and then of course your HRS service team. I do want to note we also have the overtime eligibility FAQs that are out on the website, and those are also updated and should be able to answer some of the questions that you might have. Before I transition into the Equal Pay and Opportunities Act, I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen and see if there's any questions. I don't see any in the chat, but if anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to address them.
Yes, Teddy, located here in the Pullman room. For those that don't know, since I get asked this question a lot in my area, is for the salary test, how is that affected with those that are not on a full-time 100% FTE appointment?
Yeah, that is a great question. So let's say an individual is at a 75% position, and at that 75% rate, they don't meet the exemption monthly salary, they would be eligible for overtime. So it doesn't, the salary requirement doesn't change for FTE. Great question. Any other questions? Or Heather or Melissa, anything you'd like to add that I maybe didn't cover?
Nope.
Nope, you got it all covered.
All right. Okay, on to the next topic. We will be going over the Equal Pay and Opportunities Act. The main change that occurred January 1, 2023 were some requirements under job postings. So let me get you. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So for job posting requirements, WSU and any employer in Washington with more than 15 employees must include the most reasonable and genuinely expected compensation range, which would be lowest to highest, wage scale or salary range. We also are required to provide a general description of all benefits and other compensation in job postings. The L&I describes job postings as any solicitation, including recruitment done directly by an employer or through a third party. And it's any intention to recruit job applicants that includes electronic or printed hard copy advertisements where we're indicating qualifications for desired applicants and the specific available position. I did include a link here, and we can share this PowerPoint out to the L&I website. They have a great kind of fact sheet regarding what's required on job postings. And I see we just got a chat. Oh, perfect. Thank you. A couple of extra reminders, though, that I wanted to provide as an update. Just a reminder, unlawful to base any employee's salary based on pay or career advancement opportunities on gender. Employees have the protected right to discuss their wages and have the right to access certain wage and salary information. Hiring practices such as asking an applicant for their history, their salary history, or requiring to provide a minimum previous salary contributes to ongoing earning inequalities, and that is why they are prohibited by Washington state law. Employers cannot seek the wage or salary history of an applicant. We can confirm an applicant's salary after the employee negotiates and makes an offer of employment, including pay, and the offer is accepted by the applicant. And we cannot require that an applicant's prior wage or salary history meet certain criteria to be considered for the job. Again, these aren't items that changed in January 1 of 2023, but since we're on the topic, I wanted to make sure that we shared some of those reminders. A couple of great resources. The L&I Equal Pay and Opportunities Act website, like I said, has some really great FAQs. We also have an HRS frequently asked questions, which will also link to the L&I as well. And if you have questions regarding this topic, you're always welcome to contact your HRS service team as well. And that information is also available on the HRS website. I see in the chat, reasonable and genuinely include. Great question, Kathleen. So we are including step M for civil service classifications in our postings that have all been updated to add the general benefits information as well. Because we do have individuals who can promote up to step M if they apply for that position, and in some cases can be appointed at step M. So we do include that. Any other questions?
I have a question for you, Teddy.
Yeah.
So I noticed in a recent posting that came out of my office, it was an AP position and historically had been overtime ineligible.
Okay.
It is now posted and it should be overtime eligible, but the posting itself didn't change. Is that something that we need to do on our end, or does that happen automatically with HR and the job?
Yeah, so most of our classifications and the information that we have on the website are tied to the title code, which has kind of the yes if it's overtime eligible or no if it's not. We definitely want to make sure that title code is correct. However, if we have an employment agreement that comes through where the salary maybe doesn't meet, we would ensure that the employment agreement is updated so the employee receives that offer letter, which accurately reflects that they should be overtime eligible.
Okay, but the posting itself, does that get corrected?
I don't think our posting specifically outlines if it's overtime eligible or not. It just ties it with that title code. So at this point, you shouldn't have to update it. But we can certainly add job profiles if you have concerns, and we can update that for you.
It does say that it's overtime ineligible.
Okay, yeah, then in that situation, if it specifically says that, I would recommend that we get that updated just so applicants are aware.
Okay. And that would be through your office, or is that our college's people that put that
If
in?
it's already posted, it would be good to contact your HR service team.
Okay.
Great question. Heather or Melissa, anything to add to this?
I have a question here in Pullman.
Yeah.
So for AP positions, is the salary range posted based on classification? So if it's manager, it's posted at anywhere from the, I don't even remember with the new system, the quartile 1 to quartile 4, depending on location, whatever. Is it posted at that, or is it posted at the realistic rate that the department expects to pay?
We are asking that departments post it at the realistic range. Ideally, it's lined as closely as possible with the appropriate grade and zone as you're mentioning, but we have asked for AP positions that, you know, budget and department expectations are incorporated in the salary range that they're including.
I guess kind of a follow-up question. If a department posts a range and then says, we're not negotiating, we're starting this position at the bottom of that range. Is that good faith in following the law, or is that just kind of you have to be the best candidate ever to get the top of that range, and it's not really genuine?
Yeah, we anticipate, so out on that compensation structure, it explains kind of the different quartiles and where individuals would be placed. So we do recommend departments utilize that as a guide when they're placing individuals. So it's definitely possible that individuals will be set at the minimum if that's in line with their qualifications and experience. And then if someone were to be hired in at the very top of the range, it would likely reflect, some expert level, significant experience and qualifications to be placed at that amount.
Thanks.
Heather or Melissa, anything you want to add to that answer?
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that once a department has posted a range, they can't then pay above that range. And so you may see some instances where they're posting a little higher than they intend to pay, just in case they need to go up for a really exceptional candidate. But in most circumstances, they're not going to be anywhere near that top of the range, but they can't go above it. So they tend to increase it a little more than what they're hoping to pay.
Thank you, Heather.
Hi, this is Jenny in Puyallup. I had a question. So my position went from, overtime and eligible to eligible, but there's no money to pay for overtime. And if there's no way to get the job done in the, 40 hours a week. So I'm not sure there's anything I can be told, but I'm just curious what the, HRS mindset is for how to deal with that kind of a conflict when you can't get the job done but you can't be paid if you stay later.
Yeah, definitely. We would always first kind of recommend working directly with your supervisor to talk through your position description, your responsibilities and priorities in terms of, what you're able to complete and what things may change in terms of priorities if they can, accommodate something like that. So that would always be our kind of first recommendation for that step. And then certainly if it continues or there's different expectations between the employee and manager, HRS is a resource that we can assist both the employee and the manager on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for the questions. And my colleague Heather is going to take the next topic. And Heather, I think I'm going to run your PowerPoint. So if you just want to let me know when you want me to change, I will do that.
Yes, thank you. So I am going to be going over some rule changes that went into effect July 1st of 2022 around temporary hourly employment. You can go to the next slide, please, Teddy. So we're going to talk about what were the rule changes, what are the impacts of those changes to student hourly employees, non-student hourly employees, and then also the addition of 2 new employee types, professional hourly and non-permanent. Next slide, please. So the overall of the rule change is that the RCW used to previously exempt both part-time and temporary employees from state civil service laws. And these are the positions that we would refer to as non-student temporary hourly or time slip positions that were limited to 1,050 hours in a 12-month period. In 2018, the legislature amended the RCW to remove the reference to part-time employees. And then there was a few years of back and forth about what does that really mean before OFM finalized the WAC changes effective July 1st, 2022, which now means only temporary employees are exempt from civil service. And we'll get into a little bit about exactly what that means. Next slide, please. The good news is that for student hourly employees, there's very little impact as a result of these changes. Student hourlies are still exempt from civil service. One thing that's different and has been different since Workday implementation is that those student hourly employees are not transitioned in and out of student status for the summer. as far as their employment goes, and that will remain the same. Otherwise, all of those limits apply as prior to the rule change. What makes them a student, 6 credits during spring or fall semester, or 3 credits anytime in the summer makes them a student. Of course, they have to be taking classes with us. They have to be our student to be a student employee. They're limited to a maximum of 516 hours worked in 6 consecutive months, and exceptions still exist to that 516 limit for student body officers, student news, and students working in their major. So all of that is the same as it was before this rule change. The biggest difference is that now we can no longer just switch them into a non-student hourly title when they're no longer a student. So the change is what the department has to do when someone is no longer a student. At the 10th day of each spring and fall semester, a report is run to determine who has gained or lost student status, and then each department has to take action to move those individuals into other employment types based on what that change is. So that's the difference for student hourly employees. Overall, not a huge impact for them. Non-student hourly employees is where the biggest change occurs. So non-student hourly employees are now limited to 1 appointment per lifetime per higher education employer. That appointment is limited to 1,050 hours or 12 months maximum, whichever comes first. So that also could be a much shorter appointment. Say an individual works for a department for 3 months and they're nowhere near either of those limits, but that appointment ends. Now they've used their 1 lifetime appointment. So they never hit 1050, they never hit 12 months, but they use their 1 lifetime appointment and they can no longer be a non-student hourly employee at WSU. Anyone who was in this title code on July 1st started that clock of 1050 hours and 12 months on that date. And for the most part, we're not using non-student hourly appointments moving forward. There's a few exceptions to that. Basically, when we can't find something else that fits, we may use a non-student hourly appointment, but for the most part, we're just kind of phasing those out. All of those title codes that used to exist for non-student hourly appointments have now been condensed into hourly workers. So if you have someone who is currently in that appointment type, they're going to be listed as an hourly worker instead of whatever it was before. I see a question in the chat about whether the student must be a WSU student or a student of any Washington university. They do have to be a WSU student. The RCW specifies that it has to be at the institution that they're enrolled.
Question for you.
Yeah.
So clarification. So you're saying that this type is being phased out.
Yes.
Replaced by student temp employees, or replaced by what else?
No, and that's where the 2 new employment types come in, are going to be the other options for non-students. Of course, we have a lot of units that really try to hire students as much as possible, just based on the work they have. But for those instances where you're hiring someone who's a non-student, we have a couple of new employment types. The first is professional hourly. Professional hourly is a non-student hourly position that's specifically for work that's administrative professional in nature. So someone who's performing this work and the work that they're doing in that role has to meet one of the AP exemption criteria to allow us to exempt it from the civil service rules. So there's not going to be a lot of these, simply because when you're working in an hourly capacity, it's just much less common that your work is rising to the level to meet that exemption criteria. But this is an option that exists now, and they're just called professional hourly. There's not a bunch of different title codes for that. They're all in one professional hourly category. The next option that we now have is non-permanent positions. So the rule changes have allowed higher education employers to hire into non-permanent positions. This is something that's been available for general government for quite some time and is now available to higher education. It's important to point out that they are different from project civil service positions. So if you're familiar with a project civil service position, non-permanent is yet another different type of employment. Next slide, please.
We did get a question in the chat. Shoot, now I'm not, there we go. What is the hourly range for a professional hourly position?
To my knowledge, we haven't established a formal range. Is that right, Teddy?
Yeah, that sounds correct to me. I haven't heard that we have, like bands.
Yeah.
But I think we would be providing a recommendation or setting it based on the request that's in the system that we receive and the
Yes.
work that the duties are.
Professional hourly positions are very much on a case-by-case basis, and they require, the position creation requires approval by our records unit, specifically Lisa Neal is going to approve any professional hourly position creation that comes through to verify that, the brief description does meet the level of AP, meets one of those exemption criteria, and then we'll also approve an appropriate salary accordingly. So, we don't have a formal structure for that at this point, but they are very much case by case approved individually. So for non-permanent positions, there are 5 specific reasons called out in the WACs for which we can create a non-permanent position or hire a non-permanent position. And it can be if a permanent employee is absent from the position, say someone is on an extended medical leave and you want to hire someone to fill in while they're out. Could be that we're recruiting to fill a vacant position with a permanent appointment and we need someone in the meantime. It could be a short-term immediate workload peak or other short-term need, with the understanding that if that becomes a permanent ongoing need, we need to take action to fill it on a permanent basis. It could be that we're not filling a position due to an impending or actual layoff of a permanent position, or it could be that the nature of the work is sporadic and does not fit a particular pattern and therefore is not suited to a permanent position. So the first 4 reasons are going to be what's called non-permanent schedules, and they're limited to 24 consecutive months. The 5th reason is what's considered non-permanent non-scheduled. Essentially, it's so sporadic and unpredictable that we can't even guess at what a schedule for them might be. So most of our non-permanent positions are likely to be non-permanent scheduled with some semblance of regularity. It might not be the exact same number of hours every week, but it's 15 to 20 a week or whatever that range might be with an established FTE. Next slide, please. So non-permanent positions are similar to temp hourly positions in some ways and similar to civil service in others. So like temp hourly, non-permanent employees will receive a conditions of employment outlining the rules around their position. They're also eligible for remedial action, which essentially means if they believe that we have violated the rules around their non-permanent employment, they can submit a request for remedial action to the state HR director, who would review that. And if they determine that we did in fact break the rules, then they could give them remedial action, which could be giving them a permanent position where the state HR director sets the salary and the FTE and the term and the seniority, all of the terms of the employment. That's remedial action, something that's also available to temp hourly, so it's very similar in that way. And it is employment at will, which means it requires 1 workday notice to end the non-permanent appointment prior to the established end date, right? Like they're going to have an end date, and if you're going to end it on the established end date, it doesn't require additional notification. If you're going to end it early, it requires 1 workday notice. So when it comes to how they're similar to civil service, that's going to be in the compensation and leave provisions. So non-permanent positions are going to follow the classification and compensation structure of civil service, meaning they're going to have a civil service classification, and then their pay is going to go on that range step structure associated with that classification. They're also going to have the leave provisions of civil service. So they're going to get annual leave, sick leave, personal holiday, the same as civil service, and then they're going to get holiday pay or holiday credit, depending on whether they're scheduled or non-scheduled. These positions are also eligible for benefits, actually the exact same way that temp hourlies have always been, meaning if you set the appointment up from the beginning to say that they're going to meet benefit eligibility criteria, they get benefits from day 1. If you set it up to say, no, we don't think they're going to meet that criteria, and later on they do, then they would get benefits at that point. And just like temp hourly positions, if they become benefit eligible, that employer cost of the benefit package is charged to the department budget. That's all the same as hourlies. These positions can be recruited through Handshake. They cannot be recruited through Workday. And if a department is going to recruit for them, they need to specify that it's non-permanent, so that that's clear up front to applicants. But they can also be hired on a non-competitive basis, just like temporarily. You're not required to do a recruitment. You can just hire someone if you happen to know someone who would be great. Yeah.
So question, my understanding is that Handshake is only open for WSU students or affiliated WSU people. How do the non-WSU affiliated people then apply for a position that's not a student position?
Yeah, you can set up, like other employers can set up profiles to post jobs on Handshake as well. And you can set up a profile to view jobs on Handshake. But you are right that primarily it's students who are accessing that. And so if you're posting a job on Handshake, you're likely to either get current students or very recent graduates.
And Handshake, sorry, I worked with Handshake for
Yes.
a while. Handshake, you can also connect with other schools and share with other schools, and then you may be getting those students or graduates from other schools.
Like on their Handshake.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, through Handshake, but connecting to other schools to be able to share with them.
But like community members who aren't a
Right.
student or a recent student
Right.
wouldn't be able to apply
Correct.
for these positions.
Which, there is no requirement to recruit for these positions. And really, a lot of these types of positions, departments don't do an active recruitment for. But if you wanted to be able to, you can't do it through Workday. Handshake would be your option.
We've also used Craigslist in our department for positions like this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different options out there for where you can, post it. So there was a question in the chat about bargaining unit positions, which is a great question because currently we have not yet bargained with each individual union to allow for the use of non-permanent positions. That is going to be happening hopefully soon. It's something that we had to wait for authorization from PERC, the Public Employee Relations Commission, to do that. And so that's been kind of held up that we haven't been able to negotiate that yet. So if you are in a unit that is covered by a collective bargaining agreement, you're not yet eligible to use non-permanent positions in those units. And that would be an example of when we would continue to use the non-student temp hourly title for a little bit longer because we don't have any other options. So when it comes to compensation on non-permanent positions, on the screen is just kind of an example of how they look different based on the two different types of non-permanent. So civil service and non-permanent scheduled are going to share job profiles, and they're going to share the salary ranges in Workday. So you'll see like classified pay range 30, whatever the range is. And those are going to be paid at the civil service monthly rate or prorated based on FTE as civil service or any part-time position would be. Non-permanent, non-scheduled is going to have a salary range that's going to say classified pay hourly range, whatever it is. And that's going to be used only for non-permanent, non-scheduled, and it's going to pay at the equivalent hourly rate of that civil service range instead. Non-permanent employees are going to have a periodic increment date, just like civil service positions do. The difference is that they're always going to be set at 12 months rather than most civil service hires are set at 6 months. Some civil service hires are set at 12 months, but non-permanent is always going to be at 12 months. And so there's going to be a lot of situations where a person may never see that increase because they're not in the position for 12 months. But it does exist, and they are set for each individual position. So if a person has multiple non-permanents, or if they have a civil service position and a non-permanent, they're going to have different PIDs for each of them.
And that's 12 consecutive months?
Yeah, so the way that periodic increment dates work is they're set a certain number of months out from hire. And so, for example, you hired someone in a non-permanent position January 1st, their PID is going to be January 1st of the following year. And so if they're still in that position at that point, they get their 2-step increase.
Even if they don't work like 2 months in summer, for example.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how the department handles that, right? So if someone's gonna not work the entire summer, department may choose to end that non-permanent appointment and then start a new one for the fall. And then that new one would have a new PAD. If it's like they're gonna be not working for a week here and a week there and a week there, then they're probably gonna keep them on that appointment the entire time, and then they would hit the PAD. Next slide. One of the things that we had to change for kind of as part of this to make it clearer is just overall the way that job profiles are identified in Workday. And so you may have noticed this already, like if you look at your own position as an AP employee, now in your job profile, it will say admin pro. We're going to update that at some point so it just says AP instead of admin pro. But we had to add these indicators to all of the employee types just because there's so many new ones and so many different ones to add some clarity. So you'll see that built into each of them. What is somewhat confusing for some folks is that civil service and non-permanent scheduled are not separated out, they share. So you'll see CS_NPS because it can be used for both because it's FTE based. And then non-permanent non-scheduled is going to have its own. Next slide, please.
Heather, we got a question. There isn't an 8250 yes, no available in Workday. I still see the only 8250 yes, yes. Should we continue using the yes, yes, even though these are not bargaining unit positions? And my understanding is, yes, those are just, there's different ways for those positions to be tagged as bargaining unit if they need to be. And that is still the yes, yes is the only option.
Correct.
Perfect.
So this is just an example of how the job profiles look now in Workday. What you were used to seeing before is it would have the job code, like in this example, 100I. It would have yes, no for overtime and bargaining unit eligibility. And the new addition is there in the middle where it says either NPNS or CS/NPS. That will tell you whether it's non-permanent non-scheduled or civil service or non-permanent scheduled. And then if it's non-scheduled, it's also going to say hourly at the end. So that's what they look like now. That's how you can tell what the different kind of employment is. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, non-permanent employees receive time off. They may also be eligible for some medical leaves of absence. For non-permanent scheduled, the leave accruals are going to be based on the FTE and the state service credit, similar to how civil service works. They're going to also receive holiday pay based on that FTE. For non-permanent non-scheduled, they're going to get their leave accruals based on the number of hours actually worked in each month. And then they're also going to get holiday credit for holidays in that month based on the number of hours worked in that month. And so that looks different in Workday. They're, instead of getting holiday pay on holiday, they're going to get a holiday credit that they get at the end of the month based on how many hours they worked in the month. And then they have that holiday credit to use. The same applies for personal holidays. The month that they choose to use it in, it's going to be determined like at the end of the month based on how many hours they worked in that month. So that will definitely be confusing for some employees to figure out, like, how much am I going to get for my personal holiday? Well, it depends on when you use it and how many hours you worked in that month. And if you use it at the beginning of the month, you might not know until the end of the month how many hours you're going to get for it. And all of those accruals and time offs are calculated in Workday. You don't really need to worry too much about how the calculations work, just an understanding that they are different by those two employee types. And for professional hourly, they are only eligible for sick leave at 1 hour per 40 hours worked, which is what currently exists for non-student temp hourly employees as well. So they're not going to get, annual leave, sick leave, holiday, or something. They're only going to get, all right, so they are going to get sick leave. They're only going to get the sick leave at 1 hour per 40 hours worked. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you have someone who's in like a full-time position in the university, they're getting full accruals on their regular appointment, and then they also have a non-permanent position or a professional hourly or something else, they're not going to get accruals in that second position because there's there's a cap on how much accruals you can get. Once you hit the full-time equivalent of accruals, you're not going to get additional. So if you're hiring someone into a non-permanent position and they're already getting their full accruals in some other position, then they're not going to get any in the non-permanent. The resigning from an AP, faculty, or civil service position are required to have a break in service prior to going into a non-permanent position. That will mean that the leave is paid out on that AP, faculty, or civil service position and not carried over into the non-permanent position. It's going to look a little bit different in Workday because we're not going to require a full termination process and full rehire process. It's going to be a change job with separation from faculty or staff as the reason code to indicate that there's break in service and the leave balance needs to be paid out on that original position.
Question. What's the minimum length of time for that service break? Like a day, a weekend?
Yeah, so for these instances, like this specific situation where they're going directly from one of those into a non-permanent, you're not actually going to see a break in Workday at all. It's going to be a change job. So they'll go, one day they're in the civil service AP faculty position, and the next day they'll be in non-permanent. Usually when we have a break in service, it's one workday in between. In this case, there's not going to be a day in between. It's going to go straight from one to the other, and that's why we have a special separation or change job code of separation from faculty or staff to indicate that it's a break in service and we're going to be out. So we have a lot of information available about non-permanents. We have an FAQ out on the modernization website. There's also some resources like a decision guide about what employee type is best for my needs, information about how time off and leave accruals work. The reference guides for a lot of these processes have been updated. So if you're looking at a change job, it'll be updated to reflect this information about non-permanents. And then they added some additional articles around things like how does holiday credit work and how do personal holidays work for non-permanent hospitals. There's a lot of information out there. One thing that we have not completed the updates on yet is the VPPMs themselves. So if you're looking at the VPPMs, they're not updated yet. That's still in progress. Other than that, if you have questions, I always recommend that you reach out to your HR service team. This group also has the privilege of having Melissa Pond as an ex officio to this group, who is delightful and very knowledgeable in this topic as well. So if you have questions as a group, she's a great resource for you as well. But that being said, do you have any other questions right now?
Heather, we have a question. Tony Burt on the Zoom has a hand raised.
Yeah, thanks. So my question, it's probably more of a point of clarification because I'm fairly logical thinking person. So for that break in service, if you have somebody who's going from, an AP position or a faculty position or a CS position, a lot of times there is a large leave balance that is there. And so if that leave has to be paid out, a lot of times people don't want to get paid out in that leave all at once, and they want to just exhaust it because they keep benefits longer. They don't get taxed as heavily as you would because it looks like one giant payment to the IRS. So oftentimes, at least what I've seen is, people will ride out a month or two sometimes of employment to burn up those banked hours, even though they're not actually working anymore. Well, in order to get that break of service to actually occur and get that paid out, they'd have to take it as a lump sum so that it can shift over to be that non-permanent position, or they can't go on that non-permanent position until they've ridden out those hours if they're doing it to keep the benefits and whatnot, I'm assuming.
Well, each circumstance is probably going to depend, because the most common situation where we see someone going from one of those employee types to non-permanent is they've held a position with us, let's just say it's an AP position, and they're leaving WSU to go work somewhere else. And they're saying, I know it's going to take a long time for you to fill this position. I'm willing to help out, to keep XYZ running or to train the new person or whatever it might be. I'm willing to help out a little bit for a few months until you're solid with a new person. And in that scenario, they're more likely to take the payout, in my opinion. But an employee can have both a full-time faculty AP position and a non-permanent. So if they said, I want to run out my 2 months of leave, but I also am taking a non-permanent position, it's potentially possible that they could do that. I wouldn't recommend that if they were working in the same department in the same type of work, right? Then I would just say, work however many hours a week on your regular AP appointment and run out the rest of vacation, right? There's no need to add a second appointment. But let's say in a scenario where they're leaving their AP position, they want to run out their 2 months of leave, and they're going to take a non-permanent appointment somewhere else on campus. They could do that. You can have them overlapping. This is really just for that scenario where they're fully leaving their primary position and maybe they're willing to help us out and go into a non-permanent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. I mean, that brings up yeah, no, that brings up a good point of just having them reduce their hours until they burn up their banked leave, and then they can stick around if they're going to stay in the same department helping out in a capacity.
So we are at time, but is there any other burning questions? I really want to say thank you to Melissa and Teddy and Heather for their investment of their time to come and explain that. I think that we have a little broader understanding of what's happening now. And appreciate you taking the one-off questions because there's no one size fits all when it comes to HR. We will make sure that we have the resources from this meeting on our website. So those FAQs that Heather had mentioned, I think would be really valuable for a lot of us. Plus just the recording of this, so you can go back and kind of rewatch because that was a lot. And there's probably going to be some times where you think, oh, I think I heard about that. So all that will be available on our website. You can also email HRS directly. If for some reason you're uncomfortable with that and you want that to route through APAC first on your behalf, because maybe you just want something to be anonymous, that's totally fine as well. So it's just that apac@wsu.edu. If you have any questions or comments in regards to these HRS changes. All right, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our HRS colleagues.
Thanks for having us.
That was really good, Heather.